Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm coming at you bright and early today to finish up our discussion on religion. But first, a note. So, in my last video, I realized because I'm working out of the same document I was working on when I filmed that video, I saw something. It's right here. It says Taoism was founded in the 3rd century CE. That's not right. Taoism was founded in the 3rd century BCE. It's a simple mistake, but I'm not going to refilm, at least not right now, to correct just that very small error. So I'm going to put the correction here. And now we're going to move on to our real topic. So in our last video, we talked about Confucianism and Taoism and animism and Shintoism and shamanism. And now we're going to move on to the religions out of India, primarily Hinduism and Buddhism. Now, at the end, we're going to talk about a term that I want to make sure you walk away understanding, which is the idea of syncretic religions, which is something that we're going to come into contact with later in the semester. But we're going to spend most of our time on Hinduism and Buddhism. So let's get to it. Okay. Now, Hinduism, like all religions, is tricky in some parts. Hinduism is one of the world's oldest religions, founded somewhere around the year 2000 BCE, which means that Hinduism is 4,000 years old at this point. It has its ideas taken from what are called the Vedic texts, the Vedas, and the Upanishads. Right? There are other religious texts that are important, like the Mahabharata, or within that, the Bhagavad Gita, which, by the way, I can recommend the Bhagavad Gita as a beautiful book to read. Bhagavad Gita. I'm going to mess up pronunciations constantly. My apologies, always. Now, unlike most other religions, Hinduism doesn't have a single founder. And all of those texts that I said are actually not a single scripture and not always quite adopted in all forms. In fact, Hindus themselves are in somewhat of a disagreement over whether or not they are monotheistic or polytheistic, which those terms, if you remember, monotheism means they believe in one God. Polytheism means they believe in more than one God. That feels like something that they should at least know, except here's why, right? Hinduism has thousands of gods. However, so it seems very obviously polytheistic. However, there's a pretty decent argument among Hindus because they believe in the concept of reincarnation, which is the idea of dying and living again. They also believe in the concept that perhaps all of these gods are actually the multiple iterations of one god. Therefore, there are those who believe that Hinduism is monotheistic. So, this is problematic for us, but what we can talk about within Hinduism is that those texts are important and that there are thousands of gods. Whether or not they're iterations of one, we're not going to concern ourselves with. There is a deep and rich tradition of spirituality, mysticism, belief, and meditation, as represented there by the concept of Om, right? And then there is the societal aspect of Hinduism, which is something that we really need to talk about, which is shown right here. Hinduism lends itself to the idea of a caste system. A caste system is a rigid social structure seen here, right? Where people, human beings, are tiered by their importance to society. At the top, you have a group called the Brahmin, who are the priests and the religious. Academics as well. The Kshatriya come next. Those are the warriors and the kings. The Vaishya, the merchants, landowners, craftsmen, those types of people. And then the Shudra, the commoners, the peasants, servants. And even below that are the untouchables. These are the people who live out of the castes. They are outcasts. Yes, that's where we get that term. These are people who stay in a constant state of uncleanliness. From sweeping the streets or cleaning latrines or dealing with the dead. Now, this rigid system would be important in and of itself, but there's more to it. As I mentioned, Hinduism believes in the idea of reincarnation, of death and rebirth. But there's more to it than that. When you die, whatever caste you're in, you actually have the ability to move up or down in the caste system for your next life. Now, that's based on a concept called karma, which I'm sure you've heard that. But karma is explicitly a Hindu belief that one can move up or down in caste based on how well they lived their dharma, which might not be a term that you know. Your dharma is your role, your place in society. You see, you don't actually move up or down in Hinduism based off of your ideas of personal belief or success, even, but rather how well you lived your dharma. So, even if you are the world's best lute player, right? If you are a servant, your job is to be a servant, not to go play your lute, right? Even if you're a bad servant, clumsy and spill things, right? You're better off living your dharma, your role as a servant, than trying to pursue something that is outside your caste. Now, that's important. That rigid structural aspect to Hinduism is going to stay prevalent in India, even up until today in some regions. So it's really important that you understand this. Now, there's one more concept to understand that's going to be key in differentiating Hinduism to Buddhism, because there are parts and sects of Buddhism that actually look quite a bit like Hinduism. But one key idea is the concept of moksha. Now, I mentioned that there's reincarnation, which means you're kind of on this merry-go-round of life. But the goal isn't just to keep moving up until you're a Brahmin. Actually, the goal of Hinduism is to leave the merry-go-round altogether and have your soul, your spirit, kind of ascend into the oneness of all things. Okay? That ascension, the departure of the physical world entirely, is the concept known as moksha. Now, moksha is only available to the Brahmin at the top. We're going to see why this is an important difference, because now we're going to talk about Buddhism. Now, Buddhism comes from India as well, from a prince named Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha Gautama lived somewhere in the 500s BCE, and he was a wealthy prince. He lived in a palace that had these high walls, and he was provided everything he ever needed: food, money. He had a wife, and he actually did all these things, but without ever leaving the walls of his palace. Siddhartha Gautama, for the first 29 years of his life, according to those who believe in Buddhism, never left this house, this palace. When he was 29, he kind of wanted to see what else was out there. So he gathered his courage and he left his walls. And when he did, he saw what are known as the four sights of Buddhism. He saw an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and a holy man. Now, the first three kind of reminded him of the frailty, the fragility of human life, our own mortality. And the fourth, the holy man, inspired Siddhartha Gautama. He gave up everything he owned and went and lived a very simple life. Most famously, he spent 40 days and nights underneath a tree without eating or drinking, which is where he achieved a concept known as nirvana. Now, Buddhism still believes in reincarnation, and depending on who you talk to, Buddhism may or may not believe in gods, because Buddhism, like some of the other religions we've talked about, isn't necessarily a religion. It's a philosophy. However, it can be practiced as a religion. So we're going to treat it like one, too. Now, he gets called the Buddha after he achieves this nirvana, this enlightenment. Um, and Buddha just means the enlightened one. Now, nirvana is a concept somewhat similar to moksha in that you have achieved an enlightened form, an ascended form of being, of humanity. However, there are two key differences that are going to really matter here. Number one, you can achieve nirvana while alive. Number two, anyone from any caste can achieve nirvana. You can probably already see that this might be very appealing to someone who is a Vaishya or a Shudra in the Indian caste system, people of the lower castes. And these concepts, along with others, but these primarily are going to be what draw many people to Buddhism. And Buddhism is going to gain popularity pretty rapidly over the next couple hundred years, and it's going to really culminate in a king, Ashoka the Great, a Mauryan king in the mid 200s, who leads his army in a successful campaign against the kingdom of Kalinga. And after he looks and sees how much success he's had, he looks at the devastation that he's caused by taking down the kingdom of Kalinga. It causes Ashoka to repent and find Buddhism. Now, that's going to inspire some of the tenets of Buddhism, Ashoka's journey. So let's talk about the tenets of Buddhism. Now, along with reincarnation and some other things, more or less we can identify what are called the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. I'll zoom in here. The Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. These four main tenets. Number one, all life is suffering. Number two, suffering comes from desire, our human desires. Number three, to eliminate suffering, we must first eliminate our own desires for anything, everything. And number four, which I feel like is kind of a cheat because there's a lot of parts to it. Number four is to follow the Eightfold Path, which is the right view, right intentions, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, and right mindfulness. Now, you see those all on a ship's wheel. That's actually a symbol attributed to Ashoka the Great. This is known as an Ashoka wheel, which is featured prominently on the Indian flag even today. Now, if you watched my last video, you heard me say that Buddhism is one of the primary religions of China, yet I haven't mentioned China yet. So I'm going to talk about this pretty quickly. Buddhism travels rapidly, and you can see why. Hinduism more or less stays in India because it's a rigid social class system. However, Buddhism is available. It's accessible by many. That nirvana can be achieved in this lifetime. Wow. So Buddhism gets adopted by a lot of merchants who are traveling from India to China, and in so doing, spread Buddhism rapidly through China. Buddhism will be the primary religion of China for a while. It's going to be a part of Chinese culture, and it's going to do something interesting. It's especially in China, but throughout East Asia, Buddhism is going to fracture a bit and going to differ like many other religions that we've talked about. But some of them are going to become very ritualistic, very much like what we identify as a religion. And some of those versions are going to be more philosophical. So Buddhism does some very interesting things there, but it does grab hold of China. And so it's going to enter in with Confucianism and Taoism as one of the three primary religions of China throughout history. Now, to end, we're going to talk about just one more word, because we've been talking about a religion for a while now, okay? But I want to make sure that I kind of let you see what's coming. All of these religions that we've talked about so far have been established. Islam is the latest at the year 600, more or less, CE. However, I'm going to mention some more modern religions. I mean, these are not ultra modern. We're in the 1050s or the 16th century, but far more modern than any of the religions we've talked about prior. They're going to come up later in our school year, and that's because these are what are called syncretic religions. And I want to clarify this term just so that you understand it when you see it. Syncretism is the idea of cultural meshing. Uh, and syncretism with regard to religion is when concepts within religions kind of blend and mesh and form something new. Like these examples, we have Sikhism in 1050, which draws from Islam and from other cultural ideas, including some aspects of Hinduism and then some of its own culture. Voodoo, which is Christianity mixed with some of the island culture in the Caribbean. Santeria, which is Christianity mixed with some of the native culture of Mexico. Sufism, which is Islam mixed with a good, healthy dose of mysticism, right? And we're not going to dive deep into the tenets of these religions, but what I want you to understand is when we use the term syncretism, we're talking about a meshing, a blending, and a molding into a new thing altogether when you take two other things. So that's it. We covered a lot of religions in these 3 videos, but they are important and foundational, and people are going to make decisions based off of them. People are going to live their lives dedicated to them. People are going to die for them and kill for them. So I want to make sure we had at least a basic understanding of what these religions were and where they came from. Thanks so much for listening, and keep perspective.